Hello and welcome to the very first podcast here in Football Victoria. My name is Michael Zappone, and most weeks I'll be joined by the man on my far left, Greg Blake. Hello, Greg.
Yeah, hi, Michael. How are you? It's good to see you. We haven't worked together. I know we spoke about this. We haven't worked together for 27 years. So it's been a long time between drinks, and you were crap then. Let's see if you've improved.
I was 10 years old and making coffees for you, Greg, at 3AK many moons ago. We'll revisit some of that. And we're also privileged to have a very special guest with us for our first program, Simon Hill.
Where? Oh, it's me.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Zappa. And Blakey.
Well, a man who needs no introduction, Blakey, because he's an author.
Yeah, no, look, I was out there when they were rolling out the red carpet an hour or so ago. There's a big crowd gathered, knowing that Simon Hill was coming in his Uber.
Now in the bargain buckets.
Award-winning author, you?
I wish. No. It was never going to make me a millionaire, let's be honest. But if people have bought it and they enjoy it, then that's great. If not, then hopefully they use it as a doorstop for the toilet.
Wow.
It's worth more than that. It's worth more than that.
Have you read it?
Not yet.
That's a good start. Have you read it, Blakey?
Twice.
No.
Unintelligible. Now, I just want to point out, though, too, and I completely understand this now. For all the kiddies that are watching, what's a podcast? What station are we on? What radio station? For all the kiddies, if they don't understand, these are called books, okay? You don't get them on, you don't read them on your telephone. You pick them up and you read the words contained inside. And I'll tell you what, if Simon's written it, it's got to be good, because I will say, and I just want to, from the off, I'll say, Michael, if I may, you were a kid when I first met you. How proud I am, if that's the right word, to see what you've accomplished over the journey. And for you, Mr. Hill, because despite the fact that you steal my gigs, don't you? You steal them. You swan in and you swan out in your tight pants.
They're not that tight, Blakey. Seriously, I'm 52, mate.
But the truth is, you are just a gun. You're a jet.
Bless you.
You are a great commentator. It's always, and I said this to you the other day, why are you not, calling Premier League or Serie A? Because you're a
Well,
genius.
I did. I gave that up to come over here.
Oh, and steal everybody's job.
And steal everybody's job.
Fantastic. Good choice.
If we weren't wearing headphones, I'd give you a cuddle, Blakey.
Blakey, over the course of the year, we're going to get together every week and talk about the great stories in Victorian football. And there are so many when you look at the people involved in our game, who have been involved in our game. And unfortunately, in today's media, we don't get the chance to speak at length about the history, about the people that make up our game, and tell the stories. And there are so many great stories out there.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I was talking off air beforehand about the history of the game here since I've been involved in the mid-70s and so on. But there really are. There's some great narratives that I'd love to follow and take us back through, because everybody thinks everything's just happening now, and they work in that sort of, that bubble that nothing happened before 5 years ago. It's not true, good folks at home. Footy in this state, since I've been involved, has had peaks and troughs, but it's a marvellous game to be involved in, and the people, hopefully, that we'll speak to can take us on that journey, Michael.
Can I just add something to that? Obviously, I live in Sydney, so I don't know the stories in Victoria as well as you two guys, but I'm fascinated by the history of the game in this country. We know it's been checkered in certain places, it's been stop-start, and there's political problems. That's all part of the rich tapestry of the game. And one of the reasons we started this, and I'm not just spruiking this because it's new, but this Heritage Committee, we started it because we wanted to celebrate more of those stories and get them out there, because people don't know about them. There are people. I was at Amy Park a couple of weeks ago. I think you were there as well, Zappa. And in the stands was Jim Milosavljevic, one of the goalkeepers from the 1974 World Cup. He didn't play, but he was part of the squad. The pioneering first 22 players, or however many it was, to go to the World Cup finals in West Germany. Nobody knows who Jim is. Yeah. And I said, let's get a camera on him, because he hasn't been too well either. He's getting on a little bit. And I said, let's focus on him and just, tell a little bit of his story. We only had about 10, 15 seconds. But, Jim really appreciated that. And I think a lot of ex-footballers do feel as though, and administrators, coaches, clubs, they feel as though they're a bit excluded from the modern era.
No doubt.
We've got to get them back involved and make them feel a part of the game and tell some of those stories. And I'm passionate about it.
And if I may, too, just to follow on that point, is that over the journey, because of the peaks and troughs that we talked about, and the various incarnations of the game, if you will, so many people have literally had their hearts broken by this game. They felt ostracised at various points. I had a long chat, because I do some work with Heidelberg United Alexander. Go Warriors. Am I allowed to do that? Too late.
Sure.
Of course you are.
But I had a beautiful sit down for an hour or so with Jim Tansey quite recently in his apartment overlooking Port Phillip Bay. And it's absolutely spectacular. But in the background, and when we were talking, in the background, this great old big chimney way over in the west somewhere. And he was saying, people don't realise how hard it was. He was a Socceroo at the time, and he was playing for Heidelberg, and they were doing particularly well. But they would work full time, and he said you'd play a game in Sydney on a Sunday, you'd fly back on a Sunday night. And he said, "See that chimney over there? That was the factory I worked in. I had to be there at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning."
Yeah.
And he said, we'd had lumps kicked out of us all, and those sort of things, they just fascinate me.
We had the same thing. We did the podcast for Fox Sports.
You've done this before?
Yesterday. Yeah, once or twice. We had Laurie McKenna on. We had Laurie McKenna on yesterday, and Laurie was telling us similar stories, because he first came over to Australia to play for Box Hill down here, and then he went on to move
Wembley
to Sydney. And he worked. He didn't have a full-time job in football until 1999, and everybody thinks he's been involved forever. Yeah. But he was working on the trucks. He ran a haulage company, I think, and had contracts with bed companies and all sorts of things. And a lot of the players, including some who are still playing today, like Alex Wilkinson, actually drove the trucks during the day and then went off to train with Northern Spirits at night. In fact, he told us one of the stories that Adam Kwasnick actually crashed one of the vans. So it's that's pretty recent, that history, isn't it? Anyway,
imagine
great
that rocking
stories.
up to training and saying, "Boss, I've crashed your truck." Greg, you mentioned some of the stories and some of the heartbreak, and one of the things I wanted to discuss today was your story and Simon's story, because there is a lot of interest in what broadcasters do and commentators do. And I think best represented Simon. For those of you who follow you on Twitter, your little story this week, a little behind the scenes look. It's had quite a few views, hasn't it?
It's a bit of a surprise, that, actually. To be honest, I'll tell you where the idea came from. Was as an overseas commentator called Derek Ray, who you might know. I know Derek reasonably well, Scottish guy, still working in Europe. And he posted some of his notes a few weeks ago online, and he got so many responses. And I thought, well, look, I'll stick them out there and see if people are interested. Wow, that's the biggest response I've ever had, which is bizarre, really. We're only commentators.
Yeah, well, you are.
It's a big part. Well, no,
I'm a much more well-rounded creature, if you will.
A big part of the game.
If you want to hear Simon Hill's life story all over again, it's compelling every time you read it. There's the book.
Even though you've not done yet.
No, I haven't. I've got the
Greg
time.
Blake, tell us about how you got involved with the game, because for those of us who are on social media, unlike you, the younger generation have had a little insight into the world.
Who I am.
No, they've had a
Have
little
you ever
insight
heard
into the
Pet
world.
Sematary?
Hold on a minute. Hey, let me finish.
Yeah, all right.
Have had a little insight into the world of Greg Blake, because you've followed, as I do, a great Twitter account called Death to the NSL.
Yeah.
I think it's a gentleman from Melbourne who copied many, many games over the years, is now transferring some of that material onto Twitter. But we've seen some great pieces of history in Australian football broadcasting from Greg Blake.
I watched one the other week with you down at the Gippsland Falcons. You were. You still are, Greg.
A Neil Finn lookalike from Crowded House.
I was a good-looking man, charismatic, talented.
Now looks like Mickey Rourke from that.
Off we go. Listen, just by the way, Zappers, I did remember that you were struggling to wear socks. I've been down to Savers. I got you a few pairs, and
Thank you.
Bring them up. Oh, my phone's going off.
That's got to be a yellow card offence on a podcast.
It's
surely.
a Nokia 301, okay? I'm serious. Have a look at this. It's classic. Look at this.
This will prove.
This is my mobile phone.
Are you serious?
Of course I'm bloody serious.
He's not on Twitter.
Wow.
All right, but don't be looking. No, that's...
Bring the Y fronts and the G string.
Fine. I've no issue.
Blakey,
it's all in Simon.
How did you get involved in the game?
Laurie Schwab. God bless him. Look, I had a great... if I can be wistful, may I be wistful for a moment? And
please.
Australia had just been to the World Cup in '74, and I thought, oh, that sounds all right. I went to Olympic Park, the old Olympic Park. If you're too young and you never went to the old Olympic Park, you missed something. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I went there, walked in on a state league game in '76. What was it? Slavia against Hakoah, I think it was. So you had red, you had blue, and you had the beautiful green carpet at Olympic Park. And I walked in and I said, holy crap, what am I allowed to say? That looks like a Subbuteo game. It was so perfect. You remember Subbuteo, don't you?
I do.
Well, don't say it like
Played
that.
it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Got to the quarterfinals of the North West of England Championships, if you don't mind.
It's all in the book. Yeah. How'd you go in that quarterfinal? Do you
Lost
recall?
on penalties.
Lost on penalties.
But I got my certificate presented by Sir Bobby Charlton. Unfortunately, being a City fan, of course, I wasn't that impressed at the time.
No, well, of course. No.
Sorry,
Don't know.
we digress.
No, just look, I just thought this is the most aesthetically pleasing thing, I've ever seen. The next year, I started watching Heidelberg at Olympic Park and decided I wanted to be involved in the game, that's all. And I tailed Laurie Schwab. I literally stalked him. I watched him sleep. I knew his rego number, and I kept tailing him until he got me an opportunity. And it just went on from there. I just love the game, and I love the people. You know, because I'm a Westie. I'm from the west of Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And this isn't all about me, but I haven't got a book to tell my story. But I'm a Westie from Melbourne, so for me, Alexander, Slavia, Wilhelmina, Hellas, the chants, the food at all these different places. I started, and I thought, this is a whole new world. I love it. I love it. And, I've loved it ever since.
And you went on from, you started writing, right, and then went on to television commentary and at SBS and pay TV.
And you and I don't think you realise how groundbreaking this was, but you were involved at 3OK. You were the gopher, the coffee boy.
Absolutely.
Inept at pretty much all of those tasks, but no, I'm joking. You're a lovely bloke. And did that come out, did that sound in any way bitter?
It sounded a touch insincere.
No, it's not true. No, Michael was a great, and we had this little team of people on a shoestring budget, and we were the first people in the country to put the NSL to put local domestic game on commercial radio in Australia. I'm really proud that we achieved that. And I think we went on for 3 or 4 years, didn't we?
Great stuff, Blakey.
We did, and there was one memory I have, enduring memory of that, was broadcasting a gold medal night. I think it might have been the NSL gold medal night at the time, whatever guise it was, Rothman's medal or whatever it may have been, and at some ballroom somewhere, and we're packing up.
It would have been at the old Southern Cross.
You
could still have a dart at the old Southern Cross in those days. Am I allowed to say that?
Can you do that now?
No.
And we were packing the car, and your co-commentator at the time was Sebastian Italia.
And he was stroppy.
He had a Falcon station wagon, and he's shoving all the equipment
angrily
late, 1 o'clock in the morning. Closes or attempts to close the back door.
Slams
it down, and back in those days, the glass would shatter, and the glass was all over the car park because the equipment was sticking out.
Yeah. Didn't
it wasn't a good end to the night.
I'm glad you remember that. It was good times. I wonder if he's still around, Sebastian. He was actually quite nice to me for a little period of time. Good on you, Seb. I was in his spa once. I won't tell you that. That'll be in my book.
Simon,
when's it coming out, Blake?
we could be here for hours talking about stories, but just tell us a little bit about how you first became involved with the broadcasting side of football.
With the broadcasting side, I wanted to be a writer, still do, to be fair. And
you are.
yeah, apart from that. So once I did my degree in the UK many years ago, I did a postgrad in written journalism. It's called the NCTJ pre-entry course in newspaper journalism. So, my ideal was to write for The Guardian, being a bit of a lefty, or the Daily Mirror in the UK. And when I graduated, unfortunately, there were no jobs in written journalism. The UK was going through one of its regular deep recessions, and I applied pretty much in desperation for a job as a commercial copywriter for a radio station. It wasn't journalism, but I thought, well, look, that's the closest thing that I'm probably going to get in the current market. So basically writing adverts. So I applied for this job, and they wrote back and said, thanks very much, but we don't really think you're suitable. But we noticed that you've got a little bit of experience in sport, because I'd written a couple of articles and done match reports for the Portsmouth News when I was studying in Portsmouth with the Pompey youth team. So they said, look, we've got a job here as a sports reporter. Are you interested? well, of course, that's what I wanted. So my career, even at that very first early stage, took a slightly different turn. I had no real ambition to be in broadcasting, to be honest. So I went into radio. That was in 1991, and progressed from there to BBC local radio. Did that for a few years, and then went down to London, which every aspiring broadcaster really has to do in the UK. Worked for BBC World Service for 3 years, which was a great experience. And then moved across the floor to BBC Radio 5 Live, and from that, a bit of television. And yeah, that's sort of how it happened, really.
You've both worked in radio and television. I've got a view, but I want to hear your view. Calling games on radio and television, they're both very different crafts, aren't they? What do you enjoy?
To be honest, I sort of miss radio.
Yeah.
I love television, and television, let's be honest, it pays a bit better. But radio, well, it does. But radio, there's a beauty to radio that having to describe the action, and not just where the ball is, but conditions and whatever's going on the sidelines. People aren't able to see, so you're painting pictures, which is actually quite nice. Whereas in TV, I don't know if Blakey agrees, but you're sort of complementing the pictures a little bit. You're trying to talk around the pictures because obviously people can see what's going on. So it is a slightly different art, and I still wouldn't say that I've mastered it after all these years. I don't think anybody ever does, but. They're both enjoyable, but in different ways. But I'd like one day to go back to do a bit of radio. It's fun.
Yeah.
Is that your phone again, Greg?
No, it's somebody else's Nokia 301 that I threw across the floor.
Bring the handcuffs. That's
a second yellow.
I don't know how to turn it off. All right, I was just going to tell you how nice your suit was. Michael,
Yeah, thank you.
Shelve that one.
We spoke about 3AK. That you mentioned it was groundbreaking in its day. The NSL days. Tell us a little bit about the NSL days and calling on radio. Were the likes of calling the likes of Mark Viduka when he was playing at the Melbourne Knights.
Absolutely, Mark Viduka. I don't think people realise what a sensation he was when he swept onto the scene. Before he was, he's still eligible. So his first 2 years in the game, he won the top goal scorer award and the best under-21 player and the best senior player. He was take your breath away.
That was in the same season, wasn't it?
Well, 2 years in a row, and he won all three in a row. And he just was a spine-tingling talent. And I know a lot of people I've spoken to, am I allowed to mention that Ralph's over there?
Sure.
You probably won't.
Yeah.
Ralph Barber. Could have been champ. Or not, what was it?
The Diego.
The Diegos.
Yeah.
He'd agree that I reckon that the early 90s, in terms of the NSL, was the definitive period of domestic soccer in this country, even to this very day, because we were still... We weren't global enough that kids were just upping stumps and moving out of home and heading off to the UK. They still had to do their groundwork here. So the early 90s, you had Adelaide City under Zoran Madic, an extraordinary, powerful team. The Melbourne Knights, who were just churning players out, world-class players. You had South Melbourne, you had Marconi. And, where was I going? See, I do this. I'm old now.
We're talking about Mark Viduka and the quality of the league.
Yes, the quality. And calling, I prefer radio. I mean, absolutely, because I know I probably appear to be a little bit underscored, a bit humble, as you will. But radio is great because it's not about informing people. It's about entertaining them so you can make anything from anything, and that was the joy of it.
You've come back into the game recently, Blakey. I bumped into you a couple of years ago at a Heidelberg game.
Yeah.
Hang on, where did you go? Why were you not involved?
I remember. I can tell you there was a particular. I was doing a gig for Sky TV in New Zealand, and I was calling Melbourne Knights against what was the New Zealand team early 2000?
Football Kings.
Football. Terrible. Who came up with that?
With
crap?
a Z.
Yeah, I know, right?
Michael Theoklitos, I think, played there in season 1. Yeah. His season 1. Yeah.
I watched it was a game late in the season. I think it might have been 2002, and I was broadcasting it, and there would have been 400 people there. And I thought, this is done. We're done. And we knew the A-League was coming. The winds were changing, and I just thought, no, man, it'd be... So I left. I just left. I went back to uni and studied youth work.
What reignited your passion for the game? Because it was great to see you there at Heidelberg a couple of years ago, calling games, and Blakey's been doing that for Heidelberg TV, and good on Heidelberg.
HUFC TV. Sorry, that I had to. I just Sorry.
Just tripped off the tongue, that, didn't it?
All the
It's
South
like a
Melbourne
knee joke.
supporters have just switched off.
No, I love South Melbourne is a club that I hold very... Anyway, that's not the point. What got me back was I got to a stage where I just thought I can go back and do that for fun and just enjoy doing it and re-engaging, and I'm not allowed to say it, I don't know, but re-engaging with friends in the community, Croatians, Greeks, all these different nationalities who'd I'd missed. I missed that, that
camaraderie.
Yeah, I'm going down to Oakley on Thursday night for the season opener. I'm really looking forward. I love the food at Oakley. I'm just looking forward to getting down there and maintaining my figure by having a lot of food at the canteen at Jack Edwards Reserve.
Yeah,
you make me nervous. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness. I'm not sure. I'm in equal parts aroused but intimidated.
Aroused?
Aroused. No. Okay. Just saying.
Hope you're not, Zappa.
Geez, where do we go to from there? Simon, the FFA Cup has been touched on.
Yeah.
Blakey touched on the food and the cultures. That's been one of the great advancements for our game, I suppose,
Yes,
in the last few years. And it's really brought our communities back together.
Yeah.
Blakey touched on it earlier. Give us some of your sort of feelings and experiences around what you've seen in the last few years around FFA Cup.
It's my favourite time of year, to be honest. I love it because not only are you going to different grounds that probably you've not seen too many times before or maybe never before, you're also experiencing some of that wonderful food and different culture, but also it's in the colder months. So, the grounds, it feels like being back in the UK or Europe for me. It's proper football. Not that the A-League isn't, of course it is, but it's just a different feel. And for me as a commentator as well, I actually enjoy researching clubs like Melbourne Knights and South Melbourne and Heidelberg, because then you have to delve into their history a little bit and find out stuff that you may be able to drop into the commentary, because it's all part of, the rich tapestry of the game. And this is what the FFA Cup has done so nicely for our sport. And the great thing about football, which you probably don't get in the other codes, of course, is there's always a chance of a shock as well. And we've seen that on several occasions. Probably my favourite experience, there's been several, but I think my favourite experience was going down to your club, Heidelberg United, for the game against Melbourne City. And there were 11,000 people there. Yeah. The place was packed, this wonderful old stadium. I had a fantastic souvlaki before the game, which they very kindly offered me for free as well. Thanks, Billy. Everybody was so friendly and welcoming. And do you know what the great thing about it is? And you'll know this, Blakey. Since that day, and I met all those people, I've stayed in touch with them. Yeah. And that's the camaraderie of football. But for the FFA Cup, I probably would have never met those people at Heidelberg. It's the same from several other clubs around the country as well. You create those networks and you maintain them because we've got this common denominator, and that's the love of football. And let's be honest, we also know there's a lot of politics in this game. There's a big barrier between the A-League and some of the old NSL clubs and the State League clubs. And the two, they don't always get along too well. And we tend to get, in A-League terms, we tend to get tarnished with that a little bit. Oh, you only cover the A-League, you're not interested in us. It's not true. But until you actually meet people and have those face-to-face conversations, then they go, oh, he's all right. He knows a bit about football and he loves the game. And you learn a bit about, their club and what they're all about. So it's brought people together. It's the most fantastic competition. I want us to have a national second division. Sorry, we're going too early on that particular thread.
Not at all.
But I want us to have it, and bring in some of the former NSL clubs if they're ready to go, or some of the NPL clubs if they're ambitious and they've got the means to do it. Obviously, it has to work. That's the big question mark financially, and they've got to get the modelling right, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, we need the community to come together. If we get everybody on the same side, we can be whatever we want to be. But too often we spend too many years fighting each other, and that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, and we have, and at times
you should lead the Labor Party in Britain. That was beautiful.
Well, I do better than Jeremy Corbyn. That's for sure.
I know, it wasn't terrifying. That's a point well made. And at the second division, what are the reasons that we're not acting on that? Because I've heard talk about this for years.
Well, there is a working committee. I know we have 100 committees.
Good, another
there is
working
a working
committee?
Yes, that's what we need.
Tremendous.
Bring people together. So there is a committee working on this at the moment. I think Remo Nogarotto is chairing it from the FFA.
Marconi.
Yes,
right.
and Northern Spirit and one or two others. So he's very much. I know this for a fact. 'Cause I've spoken to him about it. He's very much in favour of a second division, but of course they have to make it work.
Because what does that? See, this is the issue that I have. What does that actually mean?
Well, it means that what we can't have is a national second division that is not financially viable and that falls over within the first couple of years, because that's not going to be a good look for the game. It's not going to help the A-League either, and it's not going to help the clubs that come into it, because we've already had, goodness knows how many different reincarnations. We've got one chance at getting this right.
Good that you touched on that, because I want
one chance, and we've got to get it right.
I was engaging in this discussion with somebody else, and I can't remember who, but we were talking about. It was you,
right?
Was I talking to you before?
Probably.
Oh, that's right. You don't talk to Danes.
I was going to make an Alzheimer's joke, but I'll leave it.
No, go ahead. What was the joke? No.
Early onset.
Look, honestly, call the ambulance. I think my sides are splitting.
Don't forget my book, by the way, whilst these two are going.
It's a good read. It's a great cover. Don't worry about that. No, we were going through this kind of false dawn, if you will, because over the journey since I've been involved, there's always been this nagging if we do this into the action here, we'll get it over the top. The game will be number one. And I've done all these notes, but we went to the World Cup. Let's get a National League going. That will bring us, we'll come bubbling. It didn't happen.
That's the scraggiest note I've ever seen.
Well,
it hasn't changed in 27 years. 27 years ago, he was still making the same.
So two blokes with skinny pants on think it's okay to mock the old bloke. So, but what I'm saying, so we went to the NSL, and then the next one was, if we go to the World Cup again, we'll be the biggest game in the country. Let's go to change the NSL.
There's always a panacea,
divisions.
Isn't there?
Let's have finals. Let's go summer, winter, which we've already done that. We've already done it. We've done it. We've been to the World Cup finals 4 times in a row. It's not push. Water finds its own level. At the point where we all say, this is where the game is in the country, right? And we accept in all the old clubs in some manifestation and the A-League, and just say, let's stop aspiring to something that may well not happen, and stop deluding yourself with crap about this is going to push us over the top. Let's just see what happens if we do the best we can with what we've got.
That's very fair and reasonable.
I am a fair... on bingo night, they say that to me. They say, you are a fair and reasonable man.
You
and
just
I
give
say,
call the bingo?
No, I don't. I should.
He'd have the perfect voice to call it.
We had...
You're giving us more fodder for those old man jokes, right?
2 little ducks, 22. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. Do you need a defibrillator right now? We're in the middle of a game. That's harsh. She does.
Greg,
sorry.
One of the reasons Simon's here, as I touched on earlier, is to talk to...
book.
That just happened to be...
Hey, the book's 3 years old. It's not going to sell now, trust me.
3 years old.
Is to have a chat to some of the aspiring commentators that will be part of Football Victoria's coverage of the NPL this year. And credit to Football Victoria. Over the last few years, they've covered every game. Last year, covering every game of the men's NPL and the NPLW, which is great. It's great for people who can't get out to the games to watch highlights, and every game just about is covered by a commentator. But to find the commentators is difficult, and there are many young boys and girls who are looking for that opportunity. Simon's here today to talk to them.
It's a great initiative because, obviously we need young players coming through, we need young coaches coming through, we also need young administrators and young commentators. We need people that are going to carry the game into the next generation. And, without opportunity, then we're not going to have people to come in and, in 10 years' time, they'll still be going and getting people like me out of the UK to come and call the
Or
A-League
people
games.
like me where they drag me out of the crypt.
That's right. So we need to be replaced, you and I, Greg. That's the bottom line,
you
don't
do.
we?
Yeah, no, I've thought that for I've thought that for a fair while. No, but the other thing too, I think the thing that does concern me, we're making a mockery of this and the books here, but this is a good book and that's a good book. That's crap. But the truth is, one other thing that does concern me, and I love the craft of great sports writing. Sports Illustrated, for example, is a magazine that I will read cover to cover. It doesn't matter what they're covering. what worries me now is I remember doing some written stuff for Heidelberg, and I keep getting people saying, "Oh, that's a great blog," and I'll fire back and say, "It's not a." I've crafted a beautiful story using capital letters, punctuation, and nuance. It's not a blog, and what worries me is that so many kids believe that blogging or whatever it is they do, when they just randomly say stuff, that they're actually writing, and they're not. You're an author, don't you get upset?
I think it's a good testing ground. I think the issue with blogging is that and I don't mean that people who write blogs are poor writers or anything like that, because there are lots of very good ones out there. My issue as somebody who works as a journalist stroke broadcaster in the industry is that I think a lot of these aspiring bloggers believe that eventually they will get employed by big media organisations. And the issue these days is the proliferation of blogs is actually making people believe that they can get their journalism and broadcasting for free. And as a result, and by the way, that's a view that's probably held by a lot of TV executives and radio executives as well. So there are fewer and fewer jobs in paid journalism and paid broadcasting. It's almost the opposite of what it's intended to be. But I have to say, the whole media landscape is changing at the moment. We don't know what it's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. It's going to be very different, that's for sure. So, look, people writing about football, fantastic. The more the merrier as far as I'm concerned. I think it adds, again, to the rich tapestry of the game. The more opinions we have, the better. Whether it's going to lead to a better football industry in terms of broadcasting or radio or print in the years to come, I don't know, because I think they're actually killing it, unintentionally, but they're killing it.
So, and the lesson there, Jethro, if you're listening, keep your banjo and your cask wine. Stay at the trailer park. You're never going to be a journalist. There you go. You blog away. All right.
We look forward to hearing you call the first game of the season, Blakey. Oakley. Right. At Oakley. You mentioned it earlier.
Yes.
I want to go back a little bit and touching on the issues of today, because there's plenty of that in the current medium. We've spoken about that a little bit. Take us back to the days when you were calling NSL. Some of the clips we've seen on the death to the NSL Twitter page. You haven't seen it.
I don't know what a Twitter page is, and I'm kidding you not. I've got a Nokia 310, 301. It's over
obviously,
there.
But some of the clips we've seen on there, you really bring the character and the stories out.
There's a great one when you were at the Gippsland Falcons and you were talking to some of the locals there about the dipping crowds. Do you remember that? Years and years ago.
Oh, look, honestly, I've got very little record. Look, here's the thing, and I hope you concur with me. One of the things that we lack in this game is just enjoying it and having a sense of fun. Okay, it's not rocket science. It's not European Cup. It's not curing cancer. It's sport, and part of it is just enjoying it. And I always just thought, I'm going to have a bit of fun. They said, what are you going to do? I said, I'll have a bit of fun.
One of the great characters I want to get in here, and he only lives around the corner, so we'll get him in one day, is Mickey Peterson at South Melbourne. Crab. And a great player in his day. But I do remember one of the clips from, and you will recall this.
How do you all know these things and I don't remember doing them?
You copped a pie in the face. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't think I will.
Come on.
There's a lot of bitterness I've carried. I've carried a lot of bitterness along the way, haven't I?
Tell us about South Melbourne and the promise and the bet you made.
No, I don't. I don't want to do that. But I can tell you that one player there at South Melbourne, during the pie in the face incident, took a bit of a liberty by punching me as hard as he could in the back of the head as the cake.
I reckon I know who that is.
I reckon we don't talk about it, but that hurt. It hurt. It hurt. I'm just saying.
Let's just say it was a player at the time and a coach.
All right, we're done.
Who had a bit of a reputation, probably still does. He's currently coaching overseas.
I'll tell you.
I think I might know who that is.
Well, he's never not made it obvious when he's not fond of someone. So it wasn't. But I will tell you a true story, given that we're very close to there. Now, I was doing another film story, and this is the first time I haven't got a book, Simon.
This is why you're here.
I'm just telling you.
Tell us stories we haven't heard before.
No books from Blakey. The pier down here, what is it, the Kerford Road pier. I actually filmed a story with the South Melbourne boys, at which point I had to jump off the end of the pier. And what nobody knows to this day was while they went off skylarking down the pier, I'd actually, because I was in my clothes, I nearly drowned. Blakey nearly drowned. And I remember the side, I couldn't reach the bottom of my clothes. And I'm holding onto this, what are the pylons with all those, what are those little shell things on it, cutting me to ribbons. Going, and I was yelling, I'm drowning. And they've all wandered off. I thought I was going to die.
Where was your cameraman?
He's gone too. No. They all just, no, I don't think they even stopped and went, where is he? I didn't. Well, that just shows you where I am in the pecking order. And in the meantime...
Eventually you got up? You got out?
Yeah, I did. No, I was pretty bitter about that. I'm bitter about a lot of things. But I really did look, when you start taking on water and you know you're not breathing all that well and you're not a great swimmer and you're a bit portly and you've got your clothes on... I thought, I'm going to die today filming a stupid film story for SBS television. So there you
was
go.
Trimmers there that day? We'll have to ask Trimmers why we're there to throw the lifebuoy out.
Nobody cared, and it hurt me. It hurt me. I was hurt.
Simon, you've travelled all over the world covering our great game. I noticed the other day you sort of tweeted something about your trip to Uruguay recently, but you'd have so many great memories. What are some of the most unusual you've had?
Unusual ones?
Because with Fox, not so much now because unfortunately you're sort of calling some of the games off tube. But there were times when every World Cup qualifier, the Socceroos travelled to Jordan and to all over Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. You'd travel away and experience some amazing things.
Some incredible experiences. I think the Kyrgyzstan trip in particular was very memorable. We had a good couple of nights out as well, but I remember the day of the game was a very basic stadium, the old Soviet-style bowl in the centre of Bishkek, right? And it's only about 15,000 capacity, and this is the biggest game in their history, So there was a massive security cordon around the stadium, and we went and were set up in commentary position. I was going to call it a booth, but it wasn't. It was actually out in the open. And they basically stretched 4 or 5 planks across a couple of banks of seats. And the director was Russian. He came up and he said to me in broken English, you stand or you sit to call? And I said, whatever's easiest for you. Okay, you sit. You get up, be careful, because otherwise this go through, yeah? It's only balsa wood. So me and Andy Harper sat, stock still. We barely moved a muscle during the entire 90 minutes, right? And then about 15 minutes pre-kickoff, the stadium was full, every ticket sold out, and there were still thousands of people outside, security ring, boom. Anyway, they decided, obviously, the Kyrgyz people, stuff it, we're going to be in. Whether we've got tickets or not. So they stormed the security and they literally climbed over the walls like ants. When you're at the top of something, you're seeing all these people pouring over. It was like water coming over the walls, all these people. It was incredible. And the backdrop was this spectacular mountain range called the Alatu range with snow on the peaks. And the pitch was as bumpy as hell. And it was just like nothing you'd ever experienced. And we've had so many of those experiences. Tajikistan was the same. We went to Jordan, Lebanon before that, and there were security incidents. We had to divert off a road because there was an Al-Qaeda bomb that had been planted. Apparently they'd discovered, and the whole stadium was circled by army and tanks. I've been to Burkina Faso to do the African Cup of Nations, where I've been tear gassed and had to go in a taxi for 8 hours through the desert of Burkina Faso. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the taxi driver pulled over on the desert dirt track because there were no roads. It was just a dirt track, and said something in French. And the only guy in the car who could speak French said, "Oh my God, I don't believe this." And I said, "What's he doing?" And he said he's got to go out and buy onions for his mother. At 2 a.m. in the African desert. There was nothing there. And he got out and wandered off into the black expanse, and we were like, what if he doesn't come back? We had no idea where we were, So anyway, sure as eggs, half an hour later, back he came, bag of onions for his mother. And those are the experiences, you can only get with football. I could go on for hours about them. There's, Jordan, the day before they played Jordan in the World Cup qualifier, myself and Tom Smithies, we took a trip down to the Dead Sea and we floated on our backs reading the sports pages an hour before kickoff, and then it's just, there's so many, and that's the beauty of football, and I've been very fortunate to be involved in it many years. And you get all those cultural experiences. The football is obviously the reason you're there, but all those cultural life experiences that you have that you just can't buy. Who else would go to Tajikistan? You won't go there on holiday.
But you
go there and
do the accent again. You did when you were talking about the planks.
The planks, the Russian. I think his name was Dmitry. So you stand. Don't be careful because you fall through and drop.
That's beautiful.
So be careful.
Okay,
Dimitri.
May I ask you? You're a superstar, and you've had all.
No,
but you are. No, in terms of what you do. But when you were younger, and you were talking about you didn't really have this as a career course.
I had journalism as a course, but not broadcasting.
But not broadcasting. But you sometimes now shake your head and go, "What a life I've had!"
Absolutely.
It's pretty extraordinary.
It's been the most. There are times when you have to pinch yourselves and go, am I really doing this? I was just a kid like everybody else was who was just in love with football. I grew up, and the reason I'm here today doing this podcast in Australia is because of my dad. When I was 5 years of age, he was and still is a Man City fan. And when I was 5 years old, he said, do you want to go to the game, son? I'm going, do you want to go? And of course I was 5 and I said, yeah, all right. Went at my first game, didn't know too much about it. I thought that they started again at half time at 0-0. That's how little I knew. But from that moment on, I think he bought me it was the little things when you're a kid that really matter. There was something about the sky blue jersey that stood out to me, and the crowd obviously. And the fact that it was my dad's team and my granddad's team, and I later found out, and I put this in the book, by the way, that my great-granddad, who was a guy called Fred Taylor, played for them in 1892, before they were even Manchester City. So this was a long family heritage of being Man City fans. So my dad took me to the game, and from that moment on, I was absolutely hooked. And of course, like everybody else, I wanted to be a player. I wanted to play, but I knew it wasn't good enough. So the next thing was, okay, if I'm not good enough to be a pro footballer, what can I do to stay involved in the game? Because I'm so obsessed with it. And that's where the journalism idea and writing and all that sort of stuff. So even at 12, maybe 13, 14, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. I just didn't think it would be television or radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget part 2 of the Simon Hill story. I'm just curious, right? I've never
Two
been...
fat ladies.
I've never... Yeah, I know. Thank you. Don't worry about it. Listen, I'm just curious, how long does a podcast go for? Because I feel like I've been here for hours, and I'm just not sure. How do we? Is it
38 minutes as of now.
Is this our lives now? We just
It's the Truman Show.
Holy
you do what I do with podcasts, and I've only just started listening to podcasts, reading books.
That would explain a lot.
On my commute, I have a commute. Daily. And instead of listening to traditional radio, Blakey, I might listen to Simon on a podcast.
We can't get
That's
enough
very
of that.
good of you.
I want to gorge on you, Simon. Now,
have a little gnaw.
Blakey, before you continue with that, I should mention that our podcast is supported by some very good supporters of Victorian football, Stambos and Zaparas lawyers. So we thank them for their support.
Well, isn't that interesting that Zaparas lawyers are also a great supporter of HUFC TV?
Yes.
Along with Windsor Management. Sorry, I can keep going.
Are you going to list them? Go on.
I could. No, but I don't want to broach any boundaries.
I want to ask you a question, Blakey. All right.
Of course you do.
So when you were growing up, obviously, were you a football fan when you were growing up, or was it just that moment where you went to watch the game at Olympic Park that was the bing light bulb moment?
Two particular things. My grandfather, and I was going to mention that before, he played with my team, which are Queen's Park Rangers, currently in the English Championship, but he died, actually. Most people do.
But tends to happen.
It does, well, as I understand it, yep. But he passed away, and I had no ties anywhere. But I used to watch Freddie Villiers on World of Sport on a Sunday. You have to be very old to remember this. And he'd sit there and come on a Sunday, and they paid him lip service, and they took the mickey out of him all the time. But he had his 5-minute segment where he'd come on and, so the scores in the Victorian State League over the weekend, Wilhelmina defeated Alexander by 2-1. And he went through it all again, Macedonia. And I was sitting there thinking, either this bloke's having a stroke or I don't know what these names are or what they mean. But it drew me in. It became an adventure, and I wanted to know what these names were, what they represented. And you mentioned earlier on, Simon, about, you know, what that football experience brings people together. And I'll tell you right now, nobody, and this is one of the things that offended me, with the whole ethnic cleansing thing. Let's get rid of the ethnic clubs. I'll tell you what, right now, good folks at home, nothing brought multiculturalism to this country more than the game of football. Nothing brought it to this country. And I think I got hurt too when they decided that these ethnic clubs, we'll get rid of the names. And, you know, what a stupid idea that was, because these are beautiful people doing amazing things.
And it should be noted, just before you continue, that the what's it called? The standards, the policy that was brought in, Simon.
NCIP.
The NCIP, that's the one I'm thinking, has now been scrapped.
And been replaced with something that is completely the opposite.
So you'll see a lot more of the clubs reverting to their traditional names, traditional logos on shirts.
Well.
And we'll see that this season.
That's the great... And that's why I've got... Do you want to say something about it again?
I'll take that, yeah.
That was, but that's on the list of things that we keep saying, this is going to be the thing that will fix everything. We'll take away the ethnic names. We'll take away Have you ever heard of the...
NSL is dead.
You look like Jordan Peterson. Do you know Jordan Peterson?
No. Is he Mickey's brother?
He's a left. He's a right winger.
Right.
Now, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, jeez, it's hard being old. I haven't got a clue where I was going with that. It was going to be really good. How long have we been on air now?
Well, listen, you have a think. I just want to recount a story just on a similar theme. Yeah. You talked about the multiculturalism. And, you know, in the UK, when I grew up in the 70s, the UK was pretty white bread. It still is in large. We've just voted for Brexit. What a great thing to do.
Oh, don't.
Anyway, aside of the politics, you know, in the 70s when I grew up, England was very homogenised, and you know, there's a lot of racism towards black people in particular, and there wasn't a lot of understanding culturally of other countries. And football gave me that as well, even in England. I remember in 1977, the first European game that I went to watch was City in the UEFA Cup against Juventus. I had no idea who Juventus were. I know they're your team. Where they came from, who their players were, how to pronounce people like Franco Calzio, Roberto Boninsegna, Marco Tardelli, Dino Zoff, all of those players. And then they played at Main Road. And I went on a Wednesday night with my dad. I was 9 or 10, and I sat there and, wow. Totally mesmerised, not just by the players, but the different way they played, the different way they looked, the different way the coach acted on the sidelines, the way their fans were in the stands. Everything was completely different. And I remember going away from that and asking my dad, who's Juventus? I call him Juventus, you know. Who's Juventus? Who's this player? And my dad was like, oh, he's, you know, plays for the Italian national team. And my dad didn't know too much either. But so there you've got a seed in your head about, right, okay, so Juventus is in Italy. Which city do they play in? So it gave me geography lessons. Then you get interested in Italy as a country. It gave you history lessons. It gave you cultural lessons about the food they ate and all that sort of stuff. All the stuff that you've been saying about the NSL gave you that education and that connection as well. I had it too, different way, but through football. And that was why I felt, and all of a sudden this vista opens up. Johnny Warren used to say football made him a world citizen. I was exactly the same. All of a sudden you learn about all these different countries. And the great thing is you don't speak the same language, you don't look the same, you don't eat the same food, but you all love football. One more story. Uzbekistan, 2009. We land at the airport, middle of the night. We come out. A taxi driver's the only guy who's left. He's got one snaggle tooth. He can't speak any English. Me, Robbie Slater, Murray Shaw, piled in the back next to his spare tyre. He's looking out the window because he's got a big crack in his windscreen, so he can't see through that and driving. The only English words he knows are, which country? Which country? And we said, oh, Australia. And he went, Mark Viduka.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Cahill. Yeah. Lucas, he went through the whole damn team. For him, Australia was a speck on a map, but he knew the footballers. He knew them all. That's football.
Yep.
It is unbelievable. You know, and you talk about geography and history and all those things. I learned rudimentary mathematics. So, for example, if a team scored 2 goals, that was better than a team that scored 1. And it took me a few years to pick up on the trend, but eventually I nailed it. Still got an abacus at home, so I can work. Yeah, just saying.
Greg, we thank you for the maths lesson.
Oh, no, it's not
over. Not over.
It was good.
And I was going to start to wrap things up. We look forward to you calling games on the NPL show this year.
Yeah.
He's a great caller, by the way. I have heard you, doing the HUTV stuff. It's fantastic. You make it very, very entertaining.
It's supposed to be. It's a game.
Exactly.
We have some fun. We're allowed to have fun with the FFA stuff.
Of course we are.
Good. Because fun is, footy is the international language. I'll tell you something else that everybody everywhere has in common. They all like to have fun.
That's true.
Oh, I'm just saying.
That's true.
Simon, thank you for making the time to come down from Sydney, especially for this today, and to talk to the commentators. What's your tip to them?
I've got a few things that I want to sort of say. So I'm not going to give them instructions because it's about developing your own style. But I want to pick up on what Blake has just said there, and I've actually got that as point 8. Have fun. Because if we're not enjoying it, how can we expect people at home to enjoy it?
Well, we hope you enjoyed our first podcast of the season. There'll be plenty more every week, as long as you continue to listen and watch.
That was hard work.
Greg needs his inhaler now.
Zimmer frame, inhaler, bit of porridge.
Thank you again to Stambo's and to Zaparas lawyers. Thank you to the author, Simon Hill.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to put your thoughts into a book too, Simon. You're a little beauty. Hey, and Michael, if I may, I was
he's the one who keeps saying it's too long.
Shush you. Now you've had your time in the sun. No, I just want to say to you too, knowing our association, you are a very accomplished man now, and I'm an admirer. Okay, you need to know that.
The reason
are you aroused by Zap?
Well, I should just give this little anecdote before we
no socks.
Little anecdote before the reason I was involved in football broadcasting is because of that man, Greg Blake. So I was doing a work experience at 3AK, and I love football, and they allowed me to answer the phones once.
Great stuff.
Continued to answer the phones, and then
you did that with aplomb.
Then you left the building, and there was no one left to call the game. So there was my opportunity. So thank you to Greg. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you again.